New York City renters may no longer be on the hook for costly broker fees when signing a new lease. The City Council is poised to pass the FAIR Act, F-A-R-E, which requires landlords who hire real estate agents to pay the agents' fees themselves instead of passing them on to tenants. It has widespread support from affordable housing advocates, but those from the real estate industry argue that it wouldn't address a main reason why living in the city is so expensive. Joining us now with her insights, Bess Freedman, CEO of luxury real estate company Brown Harris Stevens. Also with us, Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle, who has been all over the real estate beat for us here at Bloomberg Television. When you think about what is trying to be done here in New York City, do you think it'll fix the problem?
No, I don't think it will fix the problem. I think there's going to be unintended consequences for this legislation. And I think they're not thinking about the long term, because what's going to happen is that landlords are going to have to raise rents because of this. If they're going to pay brokers' fees, there's going to be a lack of transparency for consumers. And it's just going to be a lot of gridlock and problems. And so the long term is going to be higher rents. So I don't think this was well thought out legislation. And just to unpack it a little bit, I testified in June with the city, at the City Council, spoke to them. We were expecting a collaboration, a discussion, to create something that made sense. And instead of that, you know, a few weeks ago, we get this legislation and we're just stuck with it without a discussion. And so the one other thing I will say, I don't want to jeopardize this, is that the sponsor of the bill, Ose, what he was quoted as saying yesterday is that this is the reason why the Dems lost the election last week, is because, you know, Mayor Adams has been critical of this as well, is because we're not supporting pocketbook issues like this. He needs to take a look in the mirror, because the reason the Dems lost is because they're stuck on identity politics and messaging and supporting the left versus common sense legislation, things that help the city. And so I think that that's like blaming Haagen-Dazs for getting fat. He needs to really take a look in the mirror when saying.
It sounds like there's a lot of emotion here. No, it sounds like there's a lot of emotion here. And like on the surface, to people who rent in this city, it would sound very appealing, but at the end of the day, it would get passed along. But it sounded as though you thought that there are ways that collaboration could happen where brokers and real estate agents wouldn't be blindsided. What would the solution have been?
I mean, I think we have a discussion. You don't make a hard and fast rule that says if you advertise a listing, then it has to be paid by the landlord. Have discussions about what would make sense. Maybe create something that would be working together versus these sort of things that they think are going to fix this, which won't fix the market at all. I think it's just short-sighted. And look, you know, I always say good politics requires compromise, right? Don't we all have to come together and work together, especially based on what happened last week? We all have to work together. And I think the City Council should want to work with the industry, with real estate professionals, with everyone. They do not have a monopoly on caring about their communities. We care about our communities too. Let's work together. That's what I would say to them.
So the vote is today. It's all but expected to be passed. And if it does go through, the average fee, to my understanding, is anywhere between 5 to 12%. Let's call it 7%. The average rent in New York on a one-bedroom and a doorman is like $4,200, $4,300. Does this mean that a year from now, the average rent in New York could be closer to $5,000, which just seems, in this affordability time, seems crazy?
Potentially that could be what happens. It's going to take some time, but it could have that impact. And I think that's what Mayor Adams was talking about yesterday, that the City Council probably has good intentions, but he thinks that the unintended consequences of this are going to end up hurting the people that they're trying to protect. And I think we have to get away from selling our narratives and identity politics and focus on solving challenges, making the cities safe, you know, doing those sorts of things versus, you know, selling this position.
You know, this is an emotional issue, I think, on all sides, because to your point, $4,200 for a one-bedroom apartment. I mean, at the end of the day, if not $5,000, if not the FAIR Act, then what? What is the problem? How do you diagnose that problem?
I mean, I think this is what we have to do, is work with people who are helping to build affordable housing, which very much the city needs. I'm involved with an organization called The Bridge, which we build affordable housing for people who are on the streets, who suffer from mental illness, who have drug addiction. They need to work collaboratively, with organizations like that. There's plenty of that to go around, and people who want to roll up their sleeves and work together. But just sort of like creating this legislation that's damaging does not help our city.
What's the fallout going to be to brokers and agents? Because there's so many brokers out there focused on rentals, and if all of a sudden there's not an easy payday because maybe people are going to be reluctant to pay those fees, or it's going to be a different situation, do you think that there's going to be fewer brokers, and do you think that the government will in some way compensate them, help them?
I mean, I do think this will have a negative impact on real estate professionals who do rentals, and there's a lot of them in New York City in particular. And look, a lot of real estate professionals that I know are single moms who are feeding their families, and so it will really hurt them greatly. It's a hustle. It's a lot of work. Remember, in the real estate business, you only get paid for results. So I think it could be greatly damaging, but we plan to fight this. I mean, Rebney has been a great supporter of ours. We're working together with them. We're not going to just sit by idly and let this sort of irresponsible legislation pass. OC has been quoted as saying that agents shouldn't collect a fee for just turning a key and opening a door. And he says he didn't say that, but we have it on tape as him saying that. I think he's impeached himself and hurt himself with credibility. And I think instead of that, we need to work together and have discussions.
Bess, we got to leave it there.
Okay.
Certainly the next mayoral race is going to get interesting. Bess Freedman, CEO of Brown Harris Stevens, and Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle.